The first thing I heard was the click, small sound, metal on metal, clean and bright through the steam. I turned with soap still on my wrist, water running hot over my shoulders, and a flame cut through the dark bathroom like a blade. It lit the hard line of a mouth, the black shape of a suit jacket damp from the night, and the gun in his hand. "Who the hell are you?" he roared. Then the flame rose just enough for him to see my face. Everything in him stopped. I knew who he was even before he said my name. Everybody in my father's world knew the stillness of Dante Salvatore. Men described him the way people described sinkholes quiet, until you stepped wrong and disappeared. "Belandi," he said. The word was worse than a bullet. I should have screamed. Covered myself, dropped to the tile and begged. That was what women did in my father's world when a man with a gun walked in. They made themselves smaller and hoped mercy looked down. Instead, I stared at the wet shine on the pistol in his hand and the steam curling around it. "Your grip's slipping," I said. His eyes narrowed. I reached for the hand towel hanging beside the glass, leaned forward slowly and laid it over the barrel and his knuckles. I was naked. Water ran down my thighs, but for one strange, stupid second, all I could think was that wet steel slid. "If you're going to shoot me," I said, "you should dry your hand first." He looked at the towel, then at me. No one moved. The shower hissed behind me. The flame in his lighter trembled once and went steady again. It smelled like cedar smoke and expensive gasoline. That smell would haunt me later. In that moment, it just meant the devil had manners enough to light the room before he killed me. "You broke into my home," he said. "I used a key." His gaze dropped. Around my neck, on a black cord gone dark with water, hung the old brass key my mother had hidden inside her sewing box 10 days before she died, the one with the tiny silver saint soldered to the bow. Something changed in his face. Not softness. Never that. But recognition sharpened into something more dangerous. "Where did you get that?" "My mother." He stepped closer. The lighter painted amber over his cheekbone, the bridge of his nose, the thin, pale scar near his mouth. He was taller than I'd imagined, broader too, not bulky, built like something made to hold under pressure. His tie was gone. His white shirt was open at the throat, one cuff unbuttoned, raindrops drying on his skin. "Your father send you?" he asked. "No. Lie better." "I'm not lying." His gaze traveled over me once, not greedily, not kindly either. Assessment. Cold. Clinically. Somehow that made my skin burn more than if he had looked like a man. I grabbed the towel hanging over his gun hand and dragged it around myself at last. He let me take it. Barely. "I don't care what you think," I said. "I needed somewhere to go. You chose the home of the man your father has tried to kill 6 times. I didn't choose you. I chose the address. And the address chose me." He shut the lighter with that same metallic click. Darkness swallowed the flame. My pulse stumbled. Then the bathroom lights came on. I flinched. He didn't. The room was all white marble and smoked mirrors and dark silver fixtures. Too clean. Too expensive. There was blood on the cuff of his shirt. Not much. Enough. He saw me see it. "It's not mine," he said. I had not asked. "Good," I said, because my mouth was either brave or suicidal. That almost smile that wasn't a smile touched one corner of his mouth and vanished. "You talk too much when you're frightened." "I talk when men point guns at me in bathrooms." That was not fear in your voice. "No?" I asked. No. It was irritation. I hated that he was right. Somewhere beyond the bathroom, a door opened. Footsteps, quick and urgent. Male voices. Italian. Then silence so sudden it felt trained. Dante never looked away from me. "Get out," a man called from the hall. Dante lifted one hand without turning. Just that. Nothing more. The voice outside went instantly quiet. I knew then what kind of power he had. Not loud, not theatrical. The kind that trained other people's bodies before their thoughts caught up. Tell me why you ran, he said. I thought of my father's study. The gold-trimmed glasses, the calm voice with which he had told two men that by the end of the week I would belong to one of them. And it did not matter which. I thought of the ring box on his desk, the way he had discussed me like shipping routes. I thought of my mother's key pressing into my palm years too late. I'm not going back, I said. Not what I asked. It's the answer you're getting. His jaw ticked once. Then he reached past me, shut off the shower, and for one unbearable second his forearm brushed my bare shoulder above the towel. Heat flashed through me so quickly it felt humiliating. He stepped back, as if he'd touched a live wire. Get dressed, he said. In what? His gaze moved to the robe hanging on the back hook. Use that. How generous. His eyes settled on mine, unreadable. Careful. The word was quiet. It landed harder than the roar had. He turned toward the door. Am I your prisoner? I asked. He paused without looking back. Tonight, my throat tightened. Tonight, he said, you're a stray that wandered into the wrong house. Then he walked out. 2 minutes later, I was dressed in a robe that smelled faintly of his cologne cold citrus over darker things, and standing in the bedroom beyond the bath, while 3 armed men avoided looking directly at me. One of them, a huge man with a broken nose and tragic eyes, kept glancing at the hallway as if hoping a woman might appear and save him from all of this. Dante took the key from my hand, turned it once between his fingers, and gave it back. Put her in the blue guest room, he said. Boss, the broken-nosed man began. Marcella's going to say I tracked Rain on the Rocco. Yes, boss, move. I looked at Dante. If you call my father? I already did. Ice slid down my spine. What? He knows you're alive. He knows you're here. Dante's expression didn't change. He also knows he won't be taking you tonight. My lips parted. Why would you tell him that? Because war announced badly is chaos. War announced clearly is leverage. I hated that I understood him. He stepped close enough for me to see the flecks of amber in his almost black eyes. Sleep, Elena. I hadn't told him my first name. He saw me realize that, and because he was cruel, or honest, or both, he let the silence stretch. Then he opened the guest room door, waited for me to enter, and locked it behind me from the outside. The lock turned once. I woke to silence thick enough to hear the air vent. For one stupid second I forgot where I was. The blue silk curtains, the pale rug, the antique crucifix over the door. None of it belonged to my father's house, and none of it belonged to anything safe. Then the memory hit whole. Steam, gun, lighter, Belandi. I sat up too fast. The rope had twisted around me in my sleep. I smelled him on the collar again, not just cologne. Outside air, rain on wool, smoke clinging deep. I hated that I noticed. A tray waited on the bedside table, espresso, toast, sliced blood orange, and a handwritten note in severe black ink. Eat, then come downstairs. MC black ink. Eat, then come downstairs. There was something almost insulting about captivity with good coffee. I found clothes folded on a chair, black leggings, a cream cashmere sweater, wool socks, even underwear still tagged. Marcella Conti, I assumed, the invisible woman whose authority had already frightened a man built like a truck. When I opened the bedroom door, it was unlocked. That felt less like mercy than proof he believed I would not get far. The penthouse overlooked lower Manhattan and cold gray plains of glass and river. Art hung on the walls, but not for decoration. Old pieces, dark saints, broken martyrdom, rooms made for power, not comfort. The marble under my socks held the night's chill. Somewhere distant, men spoke low in Italian, then stopped when they heard me. A woman in her 60s stood at the kitchen island rolling dough with the controlled violence of someone imagining skulls. Silver hair, black dress, apron crisp enough to wound. You are too thin, she said without looking up. I blinked. Good morning? That was not a question. Sit. I sat. She set a plate in front of me. Eggs, rosemary potatoes, bread still steaming. You will eat before Rocco comes in here pretending he has not already stolen a biscuit. As if summoned by insult, the broken-nosed man from last night appeared in the doorway with a paper cup and the expression of a sinner approaching confession. I heard that, Marcella. You were meant to. He saw me and put one hand dramatically over his chest. Ah! The naked intruder lives. Wonderful. My week was getting dull. Marcella smacked the back of his hand with a wooden spoon as he reached for the bread basket. You have reflux. No butter. Then I will die joyless. You were born joyless. He sighed toward the ceiling. Every day I risk my life for this house, and every day this woman tries to kill me with dry chicken. Despite myself, my mouth twitched. Rocco caught it and brightened like a dog that had found a dropped steak. There, a witness. Tell her. Men of my size cannot live on grilled zucchini. Men of your size, Marcella said, could survive winter by eating their own opinions. That made me laugh before I could stop it. The kitchen went very still, not because laughter was forbidden, because Dante Salvatore had just walked in. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie today, his shirt collar open, his silver watch catching the morning light. All the room's noise folded inward around him. Even Rocco straightened like somebody had pulled wire through his spine. Dante's gaze touched the plate in front of me, the half-love still on my face, then settled on Marcella. You fed her. Unlike some people, Marcella said. I understand that living creatures require food. His gaze shifted to Rocco's contraband paper cup. What's that? Rocco hid it behind his back. Sorrow. Dante looked at him for a full second. You're driving her. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. I'm what? You're leaving the penthouse. Hope hit too quickly. To go where? With me. Hope died. No. Dante ignored the word as if it had no legal standing in his kitchen. Finish breakfast. I'm not going anywhere with you. He picked up an espresso, took one sip, and said, Your father's men were found outside the loading entrance at 5 this morning. My stomach tightened. Doing what? Waiting? For me? For whatever I decided to do with you. Marcella set more bread on my plate, softer this time. She did not look at me. Eat. I stared at Dante. What did you do to them? Enough. The answer should have horrified me. It did. That was the problem. It also steadied something ugly and frightened inside me. Not your responsibility, I said. No, he said. You're my problem. Rocco made a tiny sign of the cross over his coffee. Marcella swatted him again. I stood too fast, chair scraping marble. You don't get to decide where I go. Dante crossed the kitchen in 3 unhurried steps. He did not touch me. He stopped close enough that I could feel the cold he'd brought in from outside still clinging to his coat. I decide who reaches you, he said. I looked up because I had to. And if I refuse, you can refuse in the car. Everything in me flared. I'm not afraid of you. Something unreadable moved through his eyes. That, he said softly, is becoming obvious. For 1 second, neither of us moved. My pulse had no manners. It beat too high, too hard. His gaze dropped to the bruise darkening near my wrist, the one I'd gotten climbing my father's garden wall. His fingers flexed once at his side. He did not reach for me. He could have. He didn't. That restraint was worse than force. It made me aware of the exact shape of the distance between us. Why did you run, Elena? He asked again. I hated the sound of my first name in his voice. It made it feel owned already. My father was arranging a marriage. Dante's face did not change. Only the room did. Rocco stopped breathing theatrically. Marcella's rolling pin slowed. To whom? Dante asked. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. It doesn't to me, I snapped. Because I left. He watched me for a beat too long. Get your coat? No. He leaned one shoulder against the island, all calm edges and patience, so controlled it felt brutal. You can come with your pride, or with Rocco carrying you like luggage. He has done worse. Rocco lifted a hand. Not to women, for the record. Mostly smug accountants. I looked at Marcella for help. She was kneading dough with enough focus to deny all civic involvement. "Where are we going?" I asked. Dante set down his espresso. "Somewhere your father can't buy the walls." Then he turned and walked out. Certain I would follow. That certainty made me angrier than the order. It also made me move. At the elevator, he held the door open. I stepped in without thanking him. Rocco crowded in beside me, muttering under his breath about anti-inflammatory tea and how this was what happened when he let Marcella control his sodium. The doors began to close. Dante met my eyes once more. "From now on," he said, voice low enough that only I heard it, "you do not disappear on me, stray." The doors sealed shut. He took me to Brooklyn, not the postcard version. Not red sauce restaurants and tourists buying saints in little silver frames. The old spine of it. Warehouse brick. Iron fire escapes. Narrow streets where men in black coats stood outside social clubs pretending to smoke while they watched everything that moved. The Salvatore compound was a restored church school wrapped around a private courtyard. The bells had been removed years ago, but I still felt their absence the way you feel a missing tooth with your tongue. Inside, the air smelled like polished wood, coffee, gun oil, and old stone warmed by too many bodies. Men spoke softly. Papers moved. Phones rang once, then were answered. Nobody ran. Everybody knew where Dante was without asking. "This is insane," I told Rocco as he escorted me through a hallway lined with framed black and white photographs of baptisms, funerals, and one little girl laughing with missing front teeth. Rocco followed my glance. His face gentled. "Luce." I turned. "His sister?" He nodded once. "Don't ask him." That was warning, not gossip. I was still looking at the photograph when Dante appeared in the doorway of an office at the far end of the hall. No coat now. Suit jacket off. Shirt sleeves rolled once. Men crowded around a table with maps and shipment manifests, but when he crooked a finger, the whole room shifted to make space. Not for me. For his decision to include me. "I'm not part of this," I said when I reached the office. "No," he said. "You're adjacent to it." That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be. On the table lay 6 small glass vials in foam slots, amber liquid inside each. No labels. My breath caught before I could stop it. Dante saw. "Your file says you trained in perfumery in Florence," he said. I stared at him. "You had a file on me. You were Vittorio Belendi's daughter. Of course I had a file on you. I should have been offended by the accuracy of it. Instead, I was offended by the incompleteness. Then your file is old. I left Florence." "When?" "After my mother got sick." His gaze held mine for one beat, then shifted to the vials. "Tell me what you smell." I folded my arms. "Why?" "Because someone is using fragrance shipments to move numbers across the river, and 2 people are already dead. You think I can smell accounting fraud?" The corner of Rocco's mouth twitched. Dante's didn't. I stepped closer despite myself. The first vial smelled of neroli too sharp to be real, cut with cheap alcohol. The second had rose absolute under synthetic musk. The third... I stopped. "What?" Dante asked. "That one doesn't belong with the others." "Why?" I lifted it carefully, rolled it once between my fingers, opened it and breathed in again. Bitter orange, cedar. Black pepper, and underneath metallic, almost sweet, not perfume. Machine oil disguised beneath scent. "This bottle was handled by someone who cleaned a weapon an hour before touching it," I said. A man at the table laughed once, nervous. "That's impossible." "No," I said. "What's impossible is Italian bergamot smelling like the inside of a firing chamber unless somebody sloppy touched the cap." Dante held out his hand. I gave him the vial. His fingers brushed mine. Only skin. Only a second. My whole arm remembered it anyway. He looked around the table. "Who logged this crate?" A thin man in a navy suit swallowed. "I did, Dante. But you use clove cigarettes," I said before I could help myself. Everyone looked at me. The man blinked. "What?" "Not him." I pointed to the broad-shouldered dock manager on his left. Him. The dock manager's face went blank. You handled it after the clerk did, I said. You smoke clove. You oil your gun with mineral solvent instead of proper cleaner, and you got impatient enough to open a perfume shipment with dirty hands. The room changed. It took me a second to understand why, not because I was right, because I had spoken across their hierarchy like I didn't know better. Dante's gaze never left the dock manager. Is she wrong? No, boss, the man said tightly, but I only checked the seals. After breaking them, silence. I looked at Dante. What's in the crates? Cash, roots, names. He set the vial down with precise care. And now, apparently, a leak. For the first time since last night, he looked surprised by me. Not softened. Not charmed. Something colder and stranger. Interest with consequences. Rocco, he said. Yes, boss. Put 2 more men on her. I stared. Because I helped you? Because now other people know you can. That should not have felt like a compliment. It did. God help me, it did. Later, while Dante argued in rapid Italian with 3 captains in the courtyard below, Marcella found me in an upstairs room that had once been a classroom and now held ledgers, sample cases, and enough locked cabinets to furnish a military confession. She set tea beside me. Your mother visited here once. I looked up so fast the chair legs scraped stone. What? Marcella's face gave nothing away. Years ago, quietly. Why? She brought Lucia candied violets. The girls laughed. Men ruined the rest. Before I could ask another question, a shout rose from the courtyard. Then a gunshot. Men moved. Fast. Chairs hit floor. Somebody swore. Dante didn't duck. He turned toward the sound like he had expected it. I reached the window just in time to see him shove one of his men behind a pillar as a second shot cracked the glass above the doorway. He looked up. Not at the sniper line. At me. His face went hard with something close to fury. He pulled a gun, fired once, and somewhere across the street a body dropped out of sight. Then he lifted one hand toward the building. Sharp. Commanding. Get down. I obeyed before pride caught up. The next sound was the click of his silver lighter somewhere below, hidden by chaos. By the time I understood what that meant, the whole house had gone to war around a scent they had named. Someone was moving against us already. By the 4th day in Dante Salvatore's world, I learned 3 things. First, his men never said his name twice, when once would do. Second, Marcella ruled the kitchen with more visible fear than Dante ruled the city. Third, danger arrived quietly there. Never with drums. Always with the softest sound in the room. That afternoon, it was the scrape of a chair leg in the hall. I was at the butcher block island slicing blood oranges so Marcella could candy the peels. She said my knife work was too elegant and therefore suspicious. I said hers looked like she had personal grudges against citrus. Rocco, perched on a stool with a bowl of plain yogurt and the expression of a condemned saint, claimed both of us were part of a conspiracy to deny him joy. I saw pancetta in the refrigerator, he said. Marcella kept chopping parsley, and you saw that it was not for you. I'm a field operative. You're a man with cholesterol. He pressed a hand to his heart. Elena, tell her the body needs comfort after violence. The body, I said carefully, might also need fiber. He stared at me as if I had stabbed him. You too? Marcella made the sign of the cross toward heaven in gratitude. I was still smiling when the chair scraped in the hall. Marcella heard it too. Her knife stopped. Rocco was already off the stool. The kitchen door opened. A young man in catering whites stepped in carrying a crate of wine. Everything in me went cold, not because I recognized him, because I recognized the smell. Orange blossom on the collar, bleach on the sleeves, and beneath it sharp and wrong, the waxy almond note my mother's room had smelled of in the last week before she died. Poison. Don't, I said. Rocco had a gun out before the word finished. The young man dropped the crate. Bottles exploded over tile. Marcella swore in language the saints definitely did not approve. The man lunged for his waistband. I moved without thinking and grabbed the nearest thing on the counter, a chef's knife. Not to throw, to shove. I slammed the flat of it into Rocco's arm as he fired, knocking his shot wide because the angle was wrong and Marcella was behind the intruder. The room detonated. Glass. Cursing, the intruder pulled his weapon. Dante appeared in the doorway like he had stepped out of the walls themselves. He crossed the space in 3 impossible strides and hit the man hard enough to break the line of his shot. The bullet shattered a copper pot above the stove. Then Dante's hand was on my waist, dragging me backward against him as he turned his own body between mine and the gunfire. Everything narrowed. His chest at my back, the violent steadiness of him, the grip on my ribs, the smell of starch, smoke, and colder things. Men shouted. Rocco tackled the intruder into the broken wine. Marcella, astonishingly, picked up a rolling pin and joined the effort like a widow avenging a nation. Then it was over. The intruder bled on Marcella's clean tile. Rocco was swearing about yogurt being a terrible last meal. Dante still had one arm around me. He let go at once. Too fast. I turned. His shirt sleeve had ridden up, a white scar cut across the inside of his forearm and disappeared under the cuff, older than the one near his mouth. Ugly in a way that suggested fire, not steel. "You knew," he said. The room was quiet now, except for the slow drip of wine off the counter. I swallowed. The smell. What smell? Bitter almond, hidden under orange blossom. My hands were shaking. I hated that he could see it. My mother smelled like that before she died. Something moved through his face. Gone before I could name it, Rocco hauled the intruder upright with help from another guard. "Can someone appreciate," he panted, "that I nearly died before lunch?" Marcella looked at the bloody mess on her floor. "If you had, at least you wouldn't drip on my grout." The laugh that burst out of me was half hysteria, half relief. Rocco looked deeply offended by my ingratitude. Dante's attention shifted to the brass key still hanging under my sweater. "Come with me." This time it wasn't an order I could fight. He took me upstairs to a locked office lined with ledgers and one small framed photograph turned face down on the desk. He shut the door. Not gently. "Your mother came here," I said before he could begin. "You spoke to Marcella. You knew." He opened a drawer, removed a tiny silver Saint medal identical to the one on my key, and laid it on the desk between us. My breath caught. "Lucia had one," he said. The room tilted. "This address," he continued, voice flat with old violence, "was once a safe apartment kept for my sister. Your mother knew that, which means, when she gave you that key, she wasn't sending you anywhere. She was sending you to me." I stared at the medal. Why would she do that? I don't know, but that was the fast mystery closing. I felt it. A door inside the story of my life unlocking backward. "My mother and your sister knew each other," I said. "Yes." "And you never thought to tell me?" His jaw hardened. "You were Vittorio Belondi's daughter standing naked in my shower. My priorities were layered. The shock should have stopped there. It didn't." "Did my father kill Lucia?" I asked. Dante went still in the terrifying way only very dangerous men could. "If I answer that now, you won't hear anything else I say." I hated him for being right. He stepped closer. My back met the desk. "I don't know what your mother was trying to save you from," he said. "I know she thought I was safer than your father. Sit with that." His hand lifted. Not to touch my face, to reach past me and turn the silver medal over once with his fingertip. Even that small movement brought his wrist near mine. Heat climbed my throat. He felt it. I knew he did, because his mouth tightened and his hand dropped at once. Another almost. It hung between us, alive and unfinished. Then he stepped back and called for guards through the door. By evening, the dead intruder had a name. The poison shipment had a route. And Dante had doubled security around me so severely it made breathing feel supervised. As he left the office, he paused. "Next time," he said without turning, "don't put yourself between a bullet and one of my men." I looked at his scar, at the way he stood like pain had once taught him posture. "Would you?" He went silent for one beat too long. Then he answered without looking at me. Yes. The door closed. My mother hid things in beautiful places. That was the first thought I had when Dante's locksmith split the old brass key open under a magnifying lamp and a thin roll of waxed paper slid into his gloved palm. Not jewels, not cash, formula notes. My chest hurt when I saw the handwriting. My mother had written recipes the way priests wrote prayers, no wasted movement, no accidental loops. On the page were scent accords, ingredient percentages, supplier codes, and beside 3 of them, street names that had nothing to do with perfume and everything to do with New York shipping lanes. Dante read in silence. Alessio Greco, his gray-eyed consigliere, read over his shoulder with the expression of a man cataloging future funerals. What is it? I asked. Alessio answered first. Your mother built us a map. Dante didn't correct him. The codes matched charitable foundations, funeral homes, church kitchens, and 2 import companies. Fronts, routes, payments. Enough to hurt men who had never been touched by law because they preferred other tools. My mother didn't do business for my father, I said. She designed fragrance for the family soap company. Your father's soap company launders more than perfume oil, Alessio said. I looked at Dante. You knew? I suspected. He tapped one line. I didn't know she was documenting it. She wouldn't, I said automatically. Not if she knew what it meant. Dante's gaze rose to mine. You still think she didn't know the house she lived in? The question cut because it sounded like truth. My mother had lived inside polished cruelty for 27 years. Maybe innocence wasn't what I had inherited from her. Maybe it was delay. I sat before my knees gave out. Marcella appeared with espresso without being called. That was one of her gifts, materializing exactly before people broke and acting like she had arrived for purely culinary reasons. She set the cup in front of me, squeezed my shoulder once, and left. I stared at the paper again. There's more. Dante waited. I pointed to a formula in the corner: orange blossom, heliotrope, bitter almond, vetiver. This wasn't meant to be worn. How do you know? Because it's not balanced for skin. It's constructed to preserve a smell, not create one. I swallowed. My mother used this in linen sprays. Sick rooms, chapels. Alessio went still. Dante's voice lowered. For what purpose? To cover something. What? I looked up at him and wished I couldn't read the answer forming in both our minds at the same time. Poison. The room went silent except for the old radiator clicking behind the shelves. She knew, I whispered. Dante's jaw flexed once, or found out too late. I pressed my fingers to my mouth. The memory came in fragments. My mother coughing into white handkerchiefs, the maid replacing orange blossoms in crystal bowls every morning after the doctor left. Not every afternoon, not every hour, every morning. The bowls had stood by the bed like decoration. Beauty. Civility. A lie with petals. My hands curled into fists on the table. She knew, I said again, but the words came out smaller this time. Not shock. Grief with its teeth finally in me. Or she knew enough to be afraid. Dante didn't answer right away. He stood by the window with the paper in his hand, the city behind him in cold panes of gray, while Alessio watched us both with the heavy stillness of a man who understood what information cost before it was spoken. My father told everyone it was her lungs, I said. He brought priests, specialists, flowers. He never let her room smell like sickness. My voice thinned. He made it smell like spring. Marcella's espresso sat untouched beneath my fingers. It had gone cold. Dante set the note down with precise care. Elena? I laughed once, and it sounded bad. Don't say my name like that unless you know something. His jaw tightened. I know men who hide death behind perfume. That isn't enough. No, he said, it isn't. I looked back at the page because it was easier than looking at him. 3 formulas. Shipping routes disguised as ingredients. street names braided into supplier codes. My mother had written the truth sideways, like she knew plain language got women buried. Then I saw the margin, a faint shine, different from the rest of the ink, thin as a hairline. Alcohol, I said. Alessio frowned. What? There's a second layer. I stood so fast my chair scraped the floor. High-proof alcohol. Heat. Do you have either? Dante was already moving. He crossed to a cabinet, pulled out a small burner and a bottle of neutral perfumer's alcohol without asking why I knew what he kept where. Maybe because he had stocked the room for business. Maybe because by now I had begun noticing where everything in his world lived. He handed them to me. Our fingers touched. Neither of us spoke. I dampened a clean strip of cotton, pressed it gently over the margin, then held the page far enough above the flame not to scorch it. The burner hissed softly. Alessio came around the table. Dante stayed close enough that I could feel the steadiness of him at my shoulder. A second script bloomed slowly out of the paper. Not formula notes. A sentence. Ask who paid the church electrician. Ask who knew Lucia was early. The room went silent. I stopped breathing for a second. Dante did not. That was worse. Alessio spoke first. Saint Agnes. Dante's face changed by degrees. Not shock. Recognition. Old rage, finding a newer room to live in. Lucia died in a church fire, I said quietly. Neither man answered, which was answer enough. She was early? My throat worked around the words. That night. Dante's voice came out flat as cooled metal. She arrived before the others. 5 minutes, maybe less. Because someone had told her to. A cold line moved down my spine. My mother knew. Enough to leave this, Alessio said. I read the hidden sentence again. Church electrician. Knew Lucia was early. It wasn't proof. It was direction. But it pointed somewhere worse than a Belandi enemy across a table. It pointed inward. Who knew the timing? I asked. Dante didn't answer. Dante. His gaze lifted to mine. Family. The word hung there like a blade. Not Belandi family. His. I took a step back. So all these years you thought my father... I still think your father wanted her dead, he said. That hasn't changed. But someone on your side opened the door. His mouth hardened. That is what this suggests. My knees weakened for a second, not from fear, from the shape of the world changing again. My father might have arranged the storm, but someone under the Salvatore name might have turned the key. I looked at the hidden sentence, then at Dante. There's more. He went very still. My mother didn't write questions unless she already had part of the answer. I traced the letters with one fingertip, not touching the ink. She wrote like this when she didn't trust paper, when she thought someone close was reading. Alessio cursed softly in Italian. Dante's silver lighter clicked open. The sound cut through me now, that same clean metallic note from the bathroom. From the first moment, he did not light it. He only held it open, staring at the small wheel, as if the movement kept something in him precise. Say it, he said. I swallowed. If she hid this, instead of sending it to police or priests, she believed the leak was inside a house no one would suspect her of distrusting. Belandi, Alessio said. Or Salvatore, I answered. Dante shut the lighter. Click. The sound landed like a door. He looked at me then, not like a hostage, not like a problem, like I had just placed a live thing in his hands, and he didn't know yet if it would save him or detonate. You just narrowed a list of suspects people have been dying over for 12 years, Alessio said. I laughed without humor. Happy to be useful. That cracked something in Dante's expression. Not much. Enough. Useful? He repeated. Your mother may have been murdered. You're allowed better language. I looked away because the softness under the sentence was too much, too misplaced, too late in my life to trust. He stepped closer anyway. Look at me, Elena. I did. And because grief is a humiliating thing, I didn't realize I was crying until his thumb stopped just short of my cheekbone and hovered there, barely not touching. Another almost. Another mercy crueler than contact. He dropped his hand before he reached me. "Alessio," he said, eyes still on mine, "find out who handled church maintenance records at St. Agnes." Quietly, Alessio nodded and left. The door shut. For a moment, it was just me, Dante, the old note, and the smell of alcohol evaporating off the page. My mother's secret. His sister's ghost. The city moving outside as if none of it mattered. "Did you love her very much?" I asked. He knew I meant Lucia. Yes. No speech. No decoration. Just the truth and the grave he kept it in. I wiped my face with the heel of my hand. "I'm sorry." His gaze moved over me like he was trying not to let it linger. "Don't apologize for other men's sins. Then why does it feel like I've been breathing them my whole life?" That made him go quiet in a different way. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower. "Because daughters pay for wars their fathers start." A knock sounded. 2 short taps. Rocco's pattern. He pushed the door open with a folder in one hand and a peeled hard-boiled egg in the other. "If nobody appreciates the nutritional sacrifices I make in this house, I'll start a union." No one answered. Rocco stopped. Looked at my face. Looked at Dante's. Slowly lowered the egg. "Oh," he said, "this is a bad room." "It is," Dante said. Rocco swallowed the whole egg in one miserable bite, as if pain should not be wasted. "Then you should probably know a records clerk from St. Agnes was found dead in his car this morning." The room changed again. Dante took the folder from him. I didn't need to see the papers to know what had happened. Someone had heard us moving. Someone close. By evening, the rain came down in hard silver lines, and the city started smelling like wet stone and exhaust. Dante moved me without warning. That was becoming a habit with him. Not cruelty exactly, more like the weather refusing committee approval. "One bag," he said. "I don't have a bag." "Then you're ready." He took me out through the school's side entrance with 4 cars, 6 armed men, and Rocco grumbling beside me about low-sodium jerky. "This is what I get," Rocco muttered, adjusting the shoulder holster under his coat. "Bullets and bland snacks." Meanwhile, Marcella is upstairs braising short ribs out of spite. "You're alive," I said. "Barely. My spirit is wasting away." Dante opened the rear car door himself. "Get in, Stray." The nickname should have irritated me. It did. It also made something uneasy and warm shift under my ribs because it no longer sounded like an insult. Not entirely. I slid inside. He got in after me. Not across. Beside me. Rain streaked the windows. The leather seat was cold through my coat. His knee was 1 inch from mine and might as well have been a confession. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere nobody would think to look for you." That sounds romantic if I ignore the bodyguards. It isn't. I watched the city smear by in wet light. Do you ever answer a question in a reassuring way? Yes. I turned to him. He looked back, unreadable. I simply haven't yet. That should not have made my pulse jump. It did. The safe house was not a penthouse or a compound. It was a narrow brownstone in Carroll Gardens with iron gates, shuttered windows, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of basil and bleach. Someone had once tried to make it a family home. The attempt survived in the crooked framed lemons on the wall and the old wool blanket folded over the sofa. Rocco did a sweep downstairs, muttering, "If I find unsalted crackers in this pantry, I'm defecting." Dante took me upstairs to a bedroom with a brass bed and thick curtains. He checked the window locks himself, then the closet, then under the bed, which would have amused me if the gesture hadn't been so grimly serious. "You expect assassins under mattresses?" I asked. "I expect men to get creative when they're desperate." Comforting. He faced me. "Stay in this room if you hear shooting." I hate when you say things like that. I know. That stopped me. You know? I'm not deaf. The silence stretched. Rain tapped the window. Somewhere below, Rocco swore softly at the discovery of herbal tea. Then Dante's hand lifted toward my throat. I froze, not from fear, from awareness. His fingers stalked at the black cord around my neck, The key lay against my sweater. He touched the brass lightly, only enough to turn it between thumb and forefinger. "You still wear it," he said. "It's all I have left of her." His gaze dropped to my mouth and away so fast, I almost believed I imagined it. Almost. He let go of the key first. Then he took a step back. Restraint again. That terrible, careful restraint. A crash shattered the front of the house. The window burst inward in a storm of glass. Dante moved before I understood the sound. He hit me hard at the waist and drove me to the floor as gunfire tore through the room above us. The mattress split. Feathers exploded into the air like torn snow. "Down," he snapped. I was already down, under him. Breath punched out of me by the impact and the impossible reality of his body covering mine. Heavy, controlled, shielding. His hand locked over the back of my head, keeping my face turned from the glass. More shots. Men downstairs shouting. Rocco yelling something obscene about dying, tea-deprived. Dante rolled, dragged me behind the wall beside the dresser, and put a gun in my lap. I stared at it. "Safety's off," he said. "Point if the door opens, don't think." Then he was gone. For one terrible paragraph of time, the world belonged to him and not to me. Dante knew the exact second he lost the lie he'd been telling himself. Not when he saw her in the shower, not when she identified the scent on the shipment. Here, watching her on the floor with glass in her hair and his gun in her hands, still not screaming, still looking at danger like it was a problem to solve. She had covered the weapon before she covered herself. That was it, that impossible practical courage. No performance, no plea. It had gotten under his skin the first night and stayed there like shrapnel. A body hit the bedroom door from the outside. I raised the gun with both hands the way he told me. My arms shook so hard I thought the whole house could hear it. The knob turned. Then a shot sounded in the hallway. A man fell against the door and slid down it with a wet, heavy sound I would hear in my sleep for years. "Stray!" Dante's voice right outside. "Open." I couldn't make my fingers work. The door pushed inward. Dante stepped through, blood on his collar, one sleeve ripped open, eyes black with the kind of calm that comes after men have died quickly. "It's me," he said. My hands failed all at once. The gun dropped to the carpet. He crossed the room, crouched in front of me, and checked me the way a medic would head, shoulders, arms, throat. Efficient. Barely touching and somehow touching everywhere. When his thumb grazed the cut on my temple, I flinched. His face changed. "Only glass," I whispered. He went still enough to scare me. "What happened?" I asked. "3 men in front, 1 in the alley." He took out a clean handkerchief and pressed it gently to my hairline. "They knew the house." My stomach dropped. "Inside information?" "Yes." Rocco appeared in the doorway with a shotgun and a scorched expression. "I would like it recorded, for legal and spiritual purposes, that I saved the basil plant." Dante didn't look up. "Are you hit?" "Only emotionally." That made a breath of laughter escape me, half hysterical, half grateful. Rocco pointed at me like victory itself and vanished again down the hall, shouting for the medic kit. Dante's hand was still at my temple. I could feel his restraint in every tendon. The room smelled of gunpowder, wet plaster, and his skin gone colder from the rain leaking through the broken window. "You're bleeding," I said. "Not badly." His forearm was cut where glass had torn through the sleeve. I reached for him before I thought better of it. "Sit down." He looked at my hand on his wrist as if it had weight. "Elena, please." That cost me. I heard it in my own voice. Something in him yielded. He sat on the floor beside me. I cleaned the cut with shaking hands while thunder rolled over Brooklyn. He watched my face, not my fingers. That was somehow harder. "You should hate me," he said quietly. "For what?" "For the life you're in, because you came to me." I tied the bandage tighter than necessary. That sounds like guilt. It's logistics. I looked up. He was too close. His mouth, the scar beside it, the rain still dark in his hair. "I don't know what this is," I whispered, "but don't stop everything because you're afraid for me." His breathing changed. That was all, but I heard it. His hand came to the side of my neck, not forcing, only asking. I could have moved. I didn't. When he kissed me, it was nothing like fear, and everything like restraint finally breaking in one careful place. Slow. Warm only because he kept it contained. His forehead touched mine when it ended, and he closed his eyes for 1 second like the cost of it had arrived late. Then his phone rang. He answered without moving away from me. Listened. Went colder. What? I asked. He looked at me, thumb still resting just below my ear. The Belandis hit one of our docks, he said. Outside, sirens started to rise. War had arrived. War was louder than I expected and quieter where it mattered. Not screaming, not action movie chaos, phones vibrating on tables, men speaking in low voices that made everyone else listen harder, cars leaving without headlights, doors closing gently over terrible decisions. By dawn, the brownstone smelled like coffee, bleach, and blood dried into cloth. I stood in the kitchen in borrowed socks while Alessio read casualty lists from his phone. 2 dead at Red Hook, 1 driver missing, the dock office burned, insurance records gone. Cameras looped. Rocco sat at the table with a bandage around his shoulder and a bowl of plain oatmeal in front of him like it had personally insulted his ancestors. If I survive organized crime, he announced to no one and everyone, it will be to die of seasoning deficiency. Marcella, who had come over before sunrise carrying soup, medicine, and moral authority, set down a tray with enough force to rattle his spoon. You were shot. In the arm. You were still shot. Yes, he said bitterly, and this is how you honor my sacrifice? Cinnamon without sugar? I laughed before I could help it. The sound startled me. It startled Dante too, though he hid it better. He stood by the sink in a fresh black shirt, speaking to a captain in Sicilian so sharp the dialect sounded like stone chips striking marble. There was dried blood still under one knuckle. Not his. Probably not all one man's either. When he finished the call, he turned to Alessio. Move Marcella back to the school. Double the upstairs detail. Marcella bristled. I am not porcelain. No, Dante said. You are leverage. She went quiet because he was right. Then he looked at me. Come upstairs. I followed him to the front bedroom where the broken glass had already been cleared. Men in this world cleaned up violence with insulting efficiency. Dante shut the door. You're leaving New York, he said. The words hit harder than I expected. What? I've arranged papers. Florence first, then wherever you want. Something hot and panicked moved through me. No. His expression didn't change. This stopped being negotiable when they fired into a safe house. I'm not luggage you can reroute. No, he said. You're the reason they're escalating. I took a step toward him. Because of my father. Because of me, he said. And what you are when you stand beside me. That should have frightened me. Instead it hurt. He opened a drawer and laid out a passport under another name, a bank envelope, a slim phone, a set of keys, a life reduced to objects, escape with organization. That was his love, maybe, or his fear dressed as strategy. You prepared this already, I said. Yes, before asking me. Yes. I hated him for how much that made me want to cry. This is my choice, I said. No, it isn't. I stared at him. You kissed me last night. His jaw went tight. You don't get to do that, I said softly, and then decide I don't exist where the consequences are. For 1 second I thought he might say something true, something dangerous. Instead he looked at the passport. You exist too much, he said. That was worse. A knock sounded. Not polite. Urgent. Alessio opened the door without waiting. Blood marked the cuff of his coat. There's been another hit on the school. Everything in Dante went still. Who? Not inside. Car bomb at the outer gate. Alessio looked at me then carefully. Rena was in the courtyard. I went cold. Rena, the 19-year-old office runner who always brought me tea, too sweet, and asked what Florence smelled like in spring. Is she alive? I asked. Alessio's silence answered. The room changed shape around my body, smaller, harder to breathe in. Dante closed his hand once around the edge of the dresser. Who else? Paolo's critical. 2 guards stable. Rena had pink barrettes she pretended not to wear. She wrote grocery lists on church donation envelopes. She had shown me how the old bell rope still moved in the locked tower if you pulled hard enough. I sat down because my legs stopped being useful. Dante looked at the passport on the bed. Then at me. Something terrible moved behind his face. He had sent girls away before, I thought suddenly, moved them like assets, closed his hand after, lived with it. I'll have the car ready in 10, he said to Alessio. No, I said. Neither man answered. I stood. My hands were shaking too hard to hide it. If I go now, she still died because I came here. Elena, no. My voice broke and then steadied on the second try. Don't do this to me like I'm fragile enough to be saved from understanding. Dante stepped toward me. This isn't about understanding. It's about keeping you breathing. And what does it cost everyone else if I leave? I asked. What does it cost you? His silence was enormous. Alessio looked between us and did the kindest thing he could have done. He left. Dante and I stood in the awful quiet after grief had entered the room and sat down with us. I can go, I said. I know that. Yes, I can walk out the front door with your papers and disappear. Yes. Another beat. But if I do, you'll become whatever wins fastest. He didn't deny it. There it was, the choice. Not forced, not trapped. Clear enough to make me sick. I thought of Florence, of clean rooms and glass bottles and sunlight on old stone, of the version of my life where my mother lived a little longer and my father loved anything more than control. That girl could leave. She was already half dead, but she could leave. I picked up the false passport. Dante watched my hand. Then I tore it in half. The sound was small. Final. His face changed in a way I had no language for. I'm done being moved, I said. Tears hot now, unavoidable. If this darkness is at my door, then I want open eyes when it comes through. Elena. No. I dropped the pieces onto the bed. If I stay, it is not because you kept me. It is because I walked back in. He looked at the torn passport. At me. At the choice I had made, and the future it murdered. Then he reached for my face very slowly, as if he expected me to pull away. I didn't. His palm held my cheek with unbearable care. Stray, he said. It was the same nickname. It was not the same word. Downstairs, a car engine turned over. Men shouted. The day kept moving toward blood. I wiped my tears myself. When do we leave? I asked. He held my gaze for 1 second longer, then opened the door. I walked back in. I made my mistake at dusk. That was the worst part of it. Not in panic. Not under a gun. In a quiet room with enough time to choose better. The note came folded inside a parish donation envelope left on the kitchen table between Marcella's Basile and Rocco's band Contraband Biscotti. No stamp. No name. Just my Saint medal drawn in one corner in the same quick, slanted hand my mother had used when she wrote shopping lists and secret things. He paid the electrician in cash. St. Agnes cellar. Ask for the red ledger before they burn it too. Come alone if you want truth before more people die. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. The paper smelled faintly of orange blossom and old wax. A church smell. My mother's winter linen spray. The scent of her last room. My pulse turned traitor. I read it twice, then a third time. Upstairs, Dante was on the phone with 3 captains and the docs. Alessio had gone to the hospital to check on Paolo. Marcella was in the pantry swearing softly at tomatoes that had the wrong texture. Rocco was at the back door arguing with a courier about whether a man recovering from a gunfight should be forced to eat lentils. I could have taken the note upstairs. I could have handed it to Dante and endured the cold fury I would have earned. Instead, I thought of Rena, dead at the gate. Of my mother writing questions and disappearing ink because plain truth got women killed. of more people dying while men discussed timing in cars and routes. So I put on my coat, slid the note into my boot, and told Marcella I needed air. She didn't even look up from the pantry shelf. Take the umbrella. Brooklyn rain is stupid. That was the last easy mercy I got. St. Agnes stood 3 blocks away from the old safe apartment my mother had once known, burn-blackened stone on one side, fresh scaffolding on the other. The church had never fully reopened after the fire that took Lucia. Half memorial, half wound. The front doors were locked. A side gate stood ajar. I hated that immediately. I also kept walking. The cellar stairs smelled of damp concrete, candle wax, and extinguished incense. My boots sounded too loud on the stone. One naked bulb buzzed above me, throwing yellow light over old storage shelves and boxes of hymnals swollen from humidity. "Hello?" I said. No answer. Then a voice I hadn't heard since the night I ran. Elena. My father stepped out from behind a pillar in a dark overcoat, his gloves folded neatly in one hand. Vittorio Bellondi looked exactly like grief would if it learned good tailoring. Silver at the temples. Immaculate posture. Eyes that had once charmed rooms and now only measured them. I stopped so hard my heel slipped on damp stone. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered. "Neither should you." His gaze moved over me quickly, clinically. "Salvatore has made you look tired. That did something ugly to me, not fear. Recognition." He was still speaking as if my body were a report. "You sent the note." "No." A second voice answered from the shadows. "I did." Cesare Salvatore stepped into the light. I had met him twice in passing at the school. Dante's uncle, white-haired, quiet, rosary always wrapped around one hand like a habit and a warning. He had spoken gently to me both times, asked whether Marcella was feeding me enough, told me old churches kept secrets in the walls. I went cold all over. "No," I said. Cesare smiled without warmth. "That is usually the first response." "You paid the electrician," I said. He tilted his head. "Eventually." My father said nothing. The cellar suddenly felt smaller than bone. "You killed Lucia," I said. Cesare's expression sharpened. "No. I taught a boy what weakness costs." The words landed so hard I almost didn't hear myself breathe. "Dante was too soft then," Cesare continued. "Always protecting the wrong things. Sisters, truces, faith. Men like your father use softness as an invitation." My father looked annoyed, not guilty. "Don't romanticize yourself, Cesare. You profited. That was the point." "And you didn't?" Cesare asked mildly. I looked between them and finally understood what hell really was. Not monsters. Men who could speak about the dead without changing temperature. "My mother knew," I said. My father's gaze shifted to me then, and for the first time there was something like feeling in it. Not love, irritation. "Your mother asked questions after she ceased being useful." I couldn't swallow. "She found your records," I whispered. "She found enough to become unfortunate." That was it. My answer. My mother had not died beautifully. She had been removed. I moved without deciding to. Backward. One step. Men came out of the dark behind me. Bellondi soldiers, 2 on the stairs, 1 by the door, 1 I recognized from childhood birthdays, which made it worse. "You used me," I said. My father's face barely altered. "You are my daughter. Use is built into the title." I should have broken then, screamed, wept, begged. Something simple and human. Instead, I heard the exact clean click of a lighter above us somewhere. Faint through the floorboards, and my heart slammed against my ribs. Dante, he was here. My father's eyes narrowed at the same sound. "You told him?" "No," Cesare said. "But he knows her habits now." Meaning he had guessed. Meaning he had looked at me often enough to understand how grief made me reckless. That hurt in a place I had no defense for. "Bring her," my father said. I fought then because fighting was all that remained. Elbow, heel, Teeth, if needed. I got one man in the throat and another across the face with the brass saint key. Then somebody caught my arms from behind and a cloth went over my mouth, smelling of ether and cheap floral soap. The cellar swayed. The last thing I saw before the dark came down was Cesare lifting his rosary hand and smiling at the sound of gunfire above us. He had wanted Dante to come. I woke to stone and cold. For a long second I didn't know where I was. Then the damp hit my skin, and I felt the iron bite of a chain around one wrist fixed to a ring in the wall. Not tight enough to tear, tight enough to remind. The room was small. A crypt chamber below the old chapel, I thought. The air smelled of mold, dust, and candle smoke trapped in rock for decades. Somewhere water dripped with the maddening patience of things that outlive you. A lantern burned on a crate near the door. My father had not stayed. Of course he hadn't. He'd never enjoyed the messy parts. He preferred rooms after. I sat up slowly. My head throbbed. My mouth tasted chemical and shame. The note. The lie. Marcella in the pantry. Dante upstairs. Rocco complaining about lentils. My own stupidity stitched all through it. A bolt slid outside. The door opened. Cesare entered alone, carrying a small leather ledger and one of Dante's silver lighters. Not Dante's exact lighter, I realized after one sharp glance. Same shape, same cold gleam. Mockery with craftsmanship. Awake, he said. I looked at the ledger. You burned the wrong records, he chuckled. You really have been around him too long. Straight to business. Did you poison my mother? No. He came nearer. Your father ordered it. I merely understood why. I closed my eyes for 1 second because, if I didn't, I might launch myself at him and die before learning anything useful. Why? I asked. Because she discovered that Lucia's death served more than one house. Belandi wanted Dante unstable. I wanted him sharpened. Your mother knew enough to threaten both outcomes. Cesare crouched in front of me, knees creaking. The problem with good women, Elena, is that they mistake knowledge for leverage. I wanted to spit in his face. I also wanted the ledger. What's in it? Payments. Clergy, electricians, shipments. Your father's men, mine. He smiled faintly. And every reason Dante will kill us both if he gets here too early. The too early caught in me. You want him here, I said. I want him finished becoming what he was always built to be. Something in my stomach turned. No, I said. You want him empty. Cesare's eyes sharpened with interest. That is often the price. He left the ledger on the crate beside the lantern and stood. Your father is setting the next stage. He still thinks you'll kneel when the room is properly arranged. He doesn't know me. No, Cesare said. That's his weakness. Dante's is worse. The door opened again. Rocco stumbled in backward with his hands zip-tied, a bruise blooming purple at his jaw. His coat was torn. His expression, however, remained deeply offended. I would like the record to show, he announced to the crypt ceiling, that I specifically asked for armed backup before anyone let emotional women wander into cursed churches. Relief hit me so hard it nearly became tears. Rocco. He twisted enough to grin at me with one side of his mouth. Hello, Signorina Catastrophe. Cesare sighed as if comedy and captivity were beneath professional standards. He followed badly. I followed injured, Rocco corrected. There's a difference. Also, if Marcella learns I let you out of sight, she'll poison my soup for real. They chained him to the opposite wall after separating us by 3 useless feet. Once the men left again, the silence throbbed. You shouldn't have come, I whispered. He leaned his head back against stone. Correct. And yet, here we are. The crypt light was bad, but I could still see the blood drying at his sleeve. I'm sorry. Yes, he said. Well, we'll revisit that after surviving. Despite everything, I almost laughed. My gaze shifted to the crate. Ledger. Lantern, leather satchel beside it. What's in the bag? I murmured. Rocco followed my eyes. Smells like booze and flowers. Perfumer's alcohol. Maybe taken from church storage, maybe from evidence. My pulse kicked. Can you reach it? With my feet? What am I, circus-trained? Rocco. He huffed, scooted awkwardly, and hooked the satchel strap with his shoe. It scraped closer by inches. I stretched, chain-cutting my wrist, and caught it with my fingertips. Inside were 3 small vials and a travel atomizer. My father should have known better than to leave a perfumer alone with solvents. "What are you doing?" Rocco whispered. "Buying noise." I emptied 1 vial cheap incense concentrate into the atomizer, added perfumer's alcohol, then tipped in the bitter almond accord from my mother's copied formula. Too much alcohol, too little fixative, it would bloom fast and die faster. Sharp. Memorable. "On my count," I said. "For what? Cough like you're dying." "That's offensive." I sound distinguished under pressure. I sprayed the mix straight into the lantern flame. The room bloomed with white fire and bitter smoke. Rocco began hacking so theatrically I would have applauded if we weren't suffocating. Men shouted outside. The bolt slammed back. The first guard opened the door and got a face full of concentrated alcohol, almond, and burning incense. He reeled. I smashed the lantern into his throat with both chained hands. Darkness swallowed the room. Then, from somewhere above the shouting, came the one sound that split me open with relief. Click. Metal on metal. Clean. Precise. Dante's silver lighter. Gunshots cracked through the corridor. 1, 2. Then a terrible, efficient silence. The crypt door filled with him. Not dramatic, not wild-eyed. Worse. Calm in the way storms are calm once they've chosen a direction. Coat open, shirt dark with rain. A cut on his cheek. Gun steady in one hand, lighter in the other, casting small gold over the stone. His gaze found me first. Everything in his face stayed controlled except one thing, the breath he took. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees in front of me. His fingers shook once against the chain before he killed that too. Stray. I didn't realize I was crying until he said it. "I know," I whispered. "I know." He broke the chain at the bolt with a shot angled so close the stone sprayed my boots. Then his hands were on my face, my shoulders, my hair, checking damage with that ruthless gentleness he used only when I was hurt. Rocco cleared his throat from the wall. "I'm also in the room, in case anyone's love story allows for secondary rescue." Dante didn't look away from me. Still talking? Unfortunately. That finally broke me into a laugh that turned into a sob halfway through. Dante pressed his forehead to mine for one brutal private second, then he stood and cut Rocco free. "Cesare?" I asked. "Gone," Dante said. "My father? Also gone." The ledger was still on the crate. I grabbed it and held it to my chest. Dante saw. Nodded once. "Good," he said. Outside, sirens were getting closer. Not police. Our kind. Rocco rubbed his wrists and peered at the shattered lantern. "For the record, if Marcella asks, I fought like a lion." "You coughed like an opera widow," I said. He put a hand to his chest. Cruel. Accurate, but cruel. Dante's hand found the back of my neck, grounding, guiding me toward the door. When I stumbled, he caught me before I could hide it. In the corridor above, one of his men waited with blood on his collar and a face gone gray. "Boss," the man said. "Belandi's moving on the school. All units." Dante's hand tightened at my neck. We looked at each other and knew the same thing at once. One of us might not survive what came next. War began at St. Agnes and ended there because some places are too broken to let a family leave them alone. By midnight, the church grounds were ringed with Salvatore cars and Belandi shooters tucked behind memorial stone and scaffolding. Rain had stopped. The city held its breath in wet silence. Floodlights threw hard white over the half-burned nave, the blackened bell tower, the scaffolds wrapped around the wound that had never healed. Inside the old sacristy, Alessio spread Cesare's ledger over a table and translated the damage into names. Payments to the electrician, cash to a parish clerk, a string of shell companies, weekly transfers from Belandi fronts into a Salvatore holding firm controlled by Cesare through proxies. 12 years of blood monetized. My stomach twisted the longer I read. He kept them at war because peace would have made him irrelevant, I said. Alessio nodded once, and rich men fear irrelevance more than hell. Dante stood at the window in a black coat, dark as the broken glass below it. He had listened in that terrible still way of his, while the worst truth about his bloodline took shape in a dead man's handwriting. He used Lucia, I said softly. Dante's expression did not move. Yes. And my father let him. Yes. Outside, engines idled. Men shifted position. Somewhere close, Rocco complained to Marcella on the phone that if he died tonight, she was not allowed to tell people he'd spent his final week eating steamed spinach. Marcella's voice crackled so loudly from the speaker I could hear her anyway. If you die, I will bury you with zucchini. Rocco looked stricken. This is abuse. For one brief, ridiculous second, the room breathed. Then Dante turned from the window. Vittorio wants parley in the nave. Alessio swore. It's a stall, he said. Yes, Dante replied. But he'll take Elena into view to prove he still believes leverage works. I looked up. He wants me there. No. Dante's answer came sharp enough to cut. He wants me there, I repeated. And if I'm not, he uses somebody else. His gaze locked on mine. I am not putting you in front of him again. You're not putting me anywhere. My pulse was hard enough to hear. I'm telling you what he'll expect. He will watch your face. He always watched rooms by watching what other people loved. Something terrible and acknowledging moved through Dante's eyes. Alessio exhaled. She's right. That didn't mean Dante had to like it. He crossed the room until he was close enough that the air changed. You stay behind me. I can do more than that. I know, he said. I'm still telling you. Another almost lived and died there. His hand nearly rose to my face. Stopped. Fell. We had become a relationship of almost inactions. Maybe that was love before it could survive its own name. I drew the small atomizer from my coat pocket, the one I had rebuilt in the crypt. This is church incense concentrate and perfumer's alcohol, I said. If he gets close enough, it'll blind him for 3 seconds, maybe 4. Rocco appeared in the doorway, fastening his holster. I would prefer a plan involving 0 seconds of blindness for everyone. You volunteered already, Alessio said. I was born into bad management. Dante looked at the atomizer in my hand, then at me. If it goes wrong, I know. That was the problem. I knew. We went in through the south transept. Wet stone underfoot, burring scars of the columns like old fingers. The nave smelled of candle wax, rain trapped in masonry, and the ghost of smoke long sunk into holy wood. Vittorio stood at the far end beneath the ruined apse. My father wore a camel overcoat and gloves. Perfect, as always. 2 men flanked him. Cesare stood half a step behind, rosary wound around his fist, as if he had mistaken ritual for absolution. I felt Dante beside me go colder than the church. Elena, my father said and smiled as though I had returned from boarding school. You made yourself difficult. Not difficult enough, apparently. Cesare's gaze moved between us. Look at him, he said to Dante. You'd burn cities for a girl who covers guns with towels. The words hit us both. Dante's face did not change. Mine must have, because Cesare smiled with sick satisfaction. So that was it, he murmured. The first night, I wondered. My father frowned. What? Nothing that ever mattered to you, I said. He ignored me. Of course he did. Dante, end this cleanly. Give me the ledger and I'll take my daughter. Dante's voice came out level and dead. You poisoned her mother. Vittorio's expression remained almost bored. I corrected a domestic problem. For 1 second, the church disappeared. The world narrowed to Dante's breathing. Cesare saw it too. There, he said softly, that's the man I made. No, Dante answered. The single word rang harder than a shout. No, he said again, stepping forward. You made a grave and taught me to stand beside it. Cesare's hand moved first. Gun. Faster than an old man should have been. Faster than grief. He fired at Dante's chest. I was already moving. I sprayed the atomizer straight into Vittorio's face as he lunged for me, the alcohol and incense hitting his eyes just as Rocco shouted and dove left. Vittorio reeled, cursing. Cesara's shot went wide because Dante pivoted and took the bullet through the shoulder instead of the heart. Then hell opened. Alessio's men hit the flanks, glass shattered. Bellenday soldiers fired from the side aisles. Rocco dragged me behind a broken pew, muttering that this was why normal people became accountants. Dante kept coming forward anyway, blood darkening down his sleeve, eyes fixed only on Cesare. Not rage, decision. Cesare fired again. Dante shot once and took the gun from his uncle's hand. Then he was on him, not theatrical, not savage, just final. "What did Lucia say?" Dante asked. Cesare was bleeding into the baptismal stone. He smiled through it. "She asked if you were coming." Something in Dante broke so quietly I felt it more than saw it. He fired. My father, half blinded, grabbed me by the coat and hauled me up. "You stupid girl," he hissed. I drove the brass Saint key into the back of his hand. He shouted. His grip opened. Dante turned at the sound and shot Vittorio once, center mass, before I even stumbled free. My father dropped to his knees beneath the ruined altar. For the first time in my life, he looked small. He stared at me, not Dante. "You chose him." I was shaking too hard to stand straight. "No," I said. "I chose me." He died with surprise in his eyes. The gunfire outside ebbed, then stopped. Rain began again through the broken roof and a soft scatter over charred wood and stone. Rocco limped toward us, clutching his side and saying, "If anyone dies after I survived all that, I'll be furious." Alessio put a hand over his own bleeding arm and laughed once because there was nothing else left to do. Dante stood in the middle of the nave with blood on his shirt, his uncle dead at his feet, his father's world ending around him. When he looked at me, there was no victory in it, only the shape of what it had cost. Rena, Lucia, my mother. Whatever belief he had kept in blood. I crossed the ruined floor and took his uninjured hand. He held on like a drowning man who knew better than to look like one. It is over. 3 months after St. Agnes, the city smelled different. Maybe not to anyone else. To me, yes. Less smoke, more rain on clean stone, the first honest cut of orange peel in Marcella's kitchen instead of bitter almond hiding under flowers. Grief had not left. It had simply stopped pretending to be perfume. We rebuilt the school slowly, not the criminal parts. Those had their own machinery. I meant the rooms where people actually lived. The upstairs classroom became a proper fragrance lab with north light and steel tables and cabinets Dante had ordered from Florence without warning me first. Marcella said he was impossible. Rocco said if anyone was importing Italian shelves, he personally deserved imported ham. He was currently standing in my doorway with a tape measure around his neck and a pastry box hidden badly behind his back. "What's that?" I asked. "Nothing. It says cannoli on the side." He looked wounded. "You can read now? In front of me?" I laughed and took the box before Marcella could materialize and strike him from the moral record. "Did she make those for you?" "She made them for the house." I intercepted them heroically. "Stole," Marcella said from the hall. Rocco flinched like a guilty schoolboy, borrowed with reverence. Marcella came in carrying fresh linen strips for testing. Her black dress was immaculate, her mouth unimpressed. But when she passed Rocco, she adjusted the crooked collar of his shirt without comment. He went completely still. I pretended not to see it. He pretended not to glow. The fragrance on my table was for Dante. Not a gift exactly. An answer. Top notes of bitter orange and bergamot, sharp enough to wake a room. A heart of smoke-threaded rose, because grief had always lived there, whether either of us liked it or not. Cedar and vetiver in the base. Dry, steady, almost austere. It held longer on skin than you expected. Marcella had sniffed the strip that morning and said, "This one looks severe until it stays." I had not told her that was the whole problem. Rocco, who believed subtlety was an urban rumor, smelled it, and announced, "This is the most romantic threat I've ever encountered." By late afternoon, the house quieted. Alessio was at the docks. Marcella bullied delivery men. Rocco, miracle of miracles, had gone to buy vegetables because Marcella told him if he returned with prosciutto, she would salt his coffee until Christmas. I was labeling samples when I heard the click, metal on metal. Dante's lighter. He stood in the doorway of the lab with Rain still on his coat shoulders and the silver lighter in one hand, a test strip in the other. He had lit nothing. Sometimes I thought he opened it only for the sound now. A measure. A pulse. "How bad is it?" I asked. He lifted the strip. It stayed. That was as close to praise as he gave most of the world. I smiled despite myself. "Then it's finished." He came farther in. The lab had become one of the few rooms where he seemed willing to let the city wait outside, maybe because no one entered without knocking, maybe because nothing in there asked him for blood. "Rocco stole from Marcella again," he said. "That sounds like his last error. He believes she'll marry him if he survives long enough." I laughed. "Does he?" Dante's mouth shifted, almost smiling. "He has a strategy." "Which is?" "Persistence, very poor nutrition, hope." He set the test strip down and looked at the bottles on the table. "What's it called?" I thought of saying something elegant, something perfumer's school and distant. Instead, I told the truth. "Vigil." His gaze lifted to mine, not because the word was beautiful, because he knew exactly what it meant. Nights spent awake beside the wounded. Candles burning in churches after funerals. Waiting beside things you love because love does not guarantee survival. He moved closer. I felt it all at once. The room, the rain at the windows, the long ache of months, the fact that this man had begun to feel like the wall I leaned on, and the danger I walked toward both. "I should have asked you sooner," he said. "For what?" His hand went into his coat pocket. When it came out, he held not a velvet box, but Lucia's small silver saint medal on a new chain, fixed beside a plain gold ring. My breath left me. "Marry me, Elena." No speech, no kneeling. No pretend softness. Just the words, rough at the edges, from everything he did not know how to make easier. He looked almost angrier than he had in gunfire. That was how frightened he was. "This is not a fairy tale," he said. "I don't become harmless. You don't become blind. There will be days I fail at gentleness. There will be nights this house still smells like war." His voice lowered. "But if there is a life after that, I want it with you." Tears came before dignity could stop them. "Dante, and if the answer is no," he said, because of course he would make room for my refusal even now, "I will still build whatever keeps you safe." That undid me more than the ring. I crossed the last distance and put my shaking hand over his. "Yes," I whispered, "then because it cost me and therefore meant something? Yes, if you ask me like I matter and not like I'm another thing you have to carry." His eyes closed once. Briefly. As if the relief hurt. "You matter," he said. Then he slid the ring onto my finger with hands steadier than mine had ever been. When he looked at me again, there was that word in his face before it reached his mouth. Stray. This time it felt like home. From the courtyard below came Rocco's scandalized voice. "Marcella, if that's an engagement, I demand a pastry exemption." Marcella answered, "You may have half a cantaloupe if you stop crying." "I'm not crying. I'm being moved against my will." Dante's forehead touched mine. Outside, rain tapped the windows. Inside, his lighter sat silent on my work table beside the finished bottle of Vigil. The room smelled of cedar and orange peel. 9 months later, I heard the click and smiled. Before I opened my eyes, morning light lay pale across our bedroom. The city beyond the windows was washed clean by overnight rain. All slate rooftops and soft silver sky. Somewhere downstairs, Marcella was already awake, which meant coffee existed and Rocco was probably trying to negotiate bacon through theology. The click came again. Dante's silver lighter, followed by the faint scratch of flame. I rolled onto my side. He stood near the fireplace in shirt sleeves, lighting a candle because the storm had tripped one circuit in the hall again. and he distrusted electricians on principle now. His shoulder had healed into a pale crescent of scar tissue he never mentioned. The cut by his mouth remained. The ring on his hand flashed when he shut the lighter. Some mornings the sight of him still moved through me like a bruise pressed in the dark. Not because I feared him, because I remembered that I had once. I took a shower while the house woke around us. Hot water. Marble warmed under bare feet. The ordinary luxury of using a room without checking the lock first. When I stepped out into steam, wrapping a towel around my hair, Dante's pistol rested on the sink where he had set it after coming in from the terrace with the security report. Wet from rain, I looked at it. Then at the hand towel. And before I covered myself properly, before I did anything sensible or vain, I reached out and draped the towel over the gun. The movement was automatic. Ridiculous. Mine. From the doorway, Dante went utterly still. I turned, one hand on my towel. What? He didn't answer at once. His gaze was on the pistol under the cloth, as if he were watching a ghost sit down in his house and smile. Then he looked at me. "You did it again," he said. I understood before he finished the sentence. Not because he had explained it in chapter 1. Because he never had. He had carried it all this time instead. "Covered the gun first," I said. "Yes." Steam curled between us. The bathroom no longer smelled of fear. Just soap, stone, and the cedar citrus trace of his cologne. I leaned against the sink. "That's what did it." His mouth shifted. Not quite a smile. Too private for that. Not all of it. But first, yes. I looked down at the towel over the weapon and laughed softly, because the gesture had once been desperation and was now a household habit with a pulse under it. "You were standing there with a gun in your hand," I said. "It seemed practical. You were naked in my shower." That also seemed impractical. His laugh came low and brief. The rarest sound in our marriage and therefore the most valuable. He crossed the room and stopped in front of me, close enough that the mirror fogged around his shoulders. I had never seen anyone answer danger without performing for it, he said quietly. No fear to flatter it. No bravado to impress it. You just saw the problem and solved it. His hand came to my wet hair, sliding the towel from it and setting it aside. You still do. Emotion moved through me so quickly I had to look away. Downstairs, right on time, Rocco's voice rose through the vent. "Marcella, if love is patient, why can't breakfast be?" Marcella answered, "Because you're annoying." A beat. Then, triumphantly, she called it love. "Elena, witness." I laughed into Dante's shoulder. He bent his head and kissed my temple. Warm, settled, earned. The lab downstairs was open by noon. Orders had come in from 3 boutiques and 1 department store willing to pretend they did not know whose wife made vigil. Alessio said legitimacy was an expensive hobby but less expensive than murder. Paolo, still limping, ran accounts and flirted badly with every receptionist in Lower Manhattan. Marcella tolerated expansion only because the new kitchen got better burners. Rocco had impossibly achieved half a date with her every Thursday after market, though he still described the arrangement as courtship under hostile occupation. Life had not become safe. That was the truth inside the piece. Men still lowered their voices when Dante entered a room. Cars still idled outside at odd hours. There were names in ledgers and sins in walls and parts of him that would always belong to violence first. But there was coffee, and wet towels, and my bottles lined in morning light. And a man who came home from darkness and put his lighter on the tray by the door because I hated when it scratched the marble. That ordinary life was the most radical thing I had ever touched. By evening, the whole house smelled like roast garlic, orange peel, and the cedar base note of the batch I had finished that morning. Dante stood in the kitchen doorway with his jacket off, sleeves rolled, watching me label bottles while pretending not to watch. "You're staring," I said. "I'm married. That isn't an answer. It's enough of one." I looked up. For who? For me. He came closer, took the last bottle from my hand, and set it aside so carefully it felt more intimate than if he had broken something. His fingers brushed the ring on mine. Another click sounded as he opened his lighter, then shut it again without flame. The old metallic note, softer now. Not threat, not warning. A punctuation mark in a life we had built. Stray, he said. The nickname carried all 12 chapters inside it now. The shower, the lock, the crypt, the bell tower, the ring, every version of us between cold and home. Yes? I asked. His gaze moved over my face as if he still could not believe he had been allowed this part. Nothing. That was a lie. I heard the truth under it anyway, so I rose on my toes and kissed him before he could decide silence was safer. Later, after dinner, after Marcella ordered Rocco to stop hovering and he answered, I hover because I care, and also because you make anchovy sauce like blackmail. I stood at the upstairs window with Dante behind me, and the city lit below like a patient wound. There are still nights I think about what choosing him cost. My mother, Rena. The girl I was before I knew what my father had made of love. Some questions do not close just because the guns do. But if you had stood where I stood that first night in the steam, in the fear, in the sound of that lighter clicking open, and seen what I saw become what I have now, would you have chosen him too?